cool March morning in downtown Los Angeles carried the faint scent of ocean air mixed with the sharp tang of exhaust from the endless stream of luxury cars weaving through the streets. Skyscrapers towered overhead, their glass facades reflecting the early sun like mirrors, and the sidewalks buzzed with young executives clutching overpriced lattes from artisanal coffee shops. This was the heart of the city's financial district, where deals worth millions were sealed over breakfast meetings and success was measured in stock options and square footage. Julia Meyer navigated the chaos with practiced ease, her Tesla Model X gliding silently through the traffic. At 31, she was the CEO of EcomCore, a tech startup that had revolutionized e-commerce software for mid-sized businesses. Her company was valued at hundreds of millions, and she'd inherited even more from her mother's estate after a tragic car accident 5 years earlier. But wealth came with isolation. Her father, a real estate mogul, had remarried soon after her mother's death and treated Julia more like a business asset than a daughter. She lived in a sprawling penthouse overlooking the city, surrounded by gadgets and assistants, but no one who truly saw her beyond the balance sheets. Today, she was running late for a crucial meeting with Japanese investors who could inject another $50 million into her expansion plans. The parking garages were full, and every curbside spot was taken. Spotting a stretch of curb near the corner of Spring and 5th Street, she glanced at the faded sign, "No Parking, Tow Zone." The paint was chipped and weathered, barely legible. "It'll be fine for a few minutes," she muttered to herself, pulling in and killing the engine. Grabbing her leather briefcase, she stepped out, her designer heels clicking against the pavement as she hurried into the sleek office tower. Elliot Reyes gripped the steering wheel of his tow truck, the city's emblem emblazoned on the door. At 38, with roots tracing back to Mexico, he had spent the last decade hauling away illegally parked vehicles for the Los Angeles Department of Transportation. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills barely. His wife, Maria, had passed away from breast cancer 4 years ago, leaving him to raise their 3 children alone in a cramped rental house in East L.A. Mateo, the eldest at 15, was a quiet kid obsessed with coding and computers. Lucia, 11, had a passion for drawing that lit up her face, though they couldn't afford art classes. And little Benji, just 6, was the family's bundle of energy, always laughing and asking endless questions. Elliot's day started early and ended late, but he never complained. He taught his kids the value of hard work and kindness, volunteering at the local community library on weekends to help with basic skills workshops for underprivileged children. This morning, his radio crackled to life. "Reyes, we've got a white Tesla in the tow zone at Spring and 5th. Get it out of there ASAP." "Copy that," Elliot replied, flipping on his lights and heading downtown. When he arrived, the car sat there gleaming under the sun, pristine electric and clearly expensive. No driver in sight. He sighed, pulling out his chains and hooking them to the rear wheels with mechanical precision. Regulations were regulations. He'd towed everything from beat-up sedans to celebrity limos without a second thought. Just as the winch began to hum, a woman burst out of the nearby building, her face flushed with panic. "Wait! Stop! That's my car!" Julia shouted, waving her arms as she approached. "I was only gone for a few minutes. It's a misunderstanding." Elliot paused briefly, glancing up from his work. She was polished, tailored suit, expensive jewelry, but her eyes held a desperation he recognized from countless encounters. "Ma'am, this is a no-parking zone. I'm just doing my job." Julia's heart raced. The investors were waiting upstairs. She couldn't afford this delay. "Please, I have a multi-million-dollar meeting right now. Just let me move it. I'll pay the fine later." He shook his head, securing the last chain. "Rules apply to everyone. I can't make exceptions." Frustration boiled over. "Do you know who I am? Julia Meyer, CEO of EcomCore. This is ridiculous." She reached into her purse, pulling out a wad of bills, several $100s. "Here, take this. Compensation for your time. Just unhook it." Elliot straightened, his dark eyes meeting hers. There was no anger in them, just weary resolve. "I don't take bribes, ma'am. The car's going to the impound lot. You can pick it up there after paying the fee properly." Julia stood frozen as he climbed back into the truck and activated the lift. The Tesla rose slowly, its sleek frame now dangling helplessly. A small crowd had gathered, phones out, recording the scene. Whispers rippled through. "That's gotta sting." For the first time in her life, Julia felt a wave of genuine humiliation, not from the stares, but from the realization that her money and status meant nothing here. This man in his worn uniform had dismissed her like she was just another violator. No flattery, no concessions, just the rules. As the truck pulled away with her car in tow, Julia watched in stunned silence. The meeting upstairs suddenly felt trivial. For years she'd controlled every outcome with a check or a call. But today, in the middle of bustling L.A., she'd been powerless. And strangely, that stung more than the tow itself. The impound lot on the outskirts of downtown Los Angeles was a sprawling sea of confiscated vehicles under harsh fluorescent lights. The air thick with the smell of oil and exhaust. Julia arrived in a rideshare, her designer coat pulled tight against the chill, still fuming from the morning's fiasco. She'd rescheduled the investor meeting with a quick email blaming unforeseen circumstances, but the delay gnawed at her. 90 minutes ticked by in the waiting area, surrounded by frustrated drivers arguing with clerks. When her name was finally called, she approached the counter, ready to throw her weight around if needed. Behind the glass partition sat Elliot, typing away at a computer. He didn't look up immediately, his uniform shirt slightly rumpled from the day's work. Julia Meyer Tesla Model X White. Tow fee is $380 plus storage if it sits longer. She slid her credit card through the slot, but pulled out cash instead a crisp $1,000 bill. Here, that should cover it and a little extra for the hassle. Elliot glanced at the money, then pushed it back. Fees $380. I don't accept tips or extras. Pay exact or use the card. Julia blinked, unaccustomed to refusal. Come on, you must get this all the time. It's just to make things smoother. Ma'am, smoother for who rules are rules. Exact amount, please. A coworker passing by chuckled. Tesla lady, huh? Fancy ride, bet that stung getting towed. Julia's cheeks burned as she fumbled for the right bills. She signed the paperwork in silence, retrieved her keys, and drove off the Tesla humming quietly beneath her. But Elliot's words lingered. No greed, no resentment, just indifference to her status. It was unsettling, almost intriguing. That night in her penthouse, with its panoramic views of the glittering city lights, Julia couldn't shake the encounter. She poured a glass of wine and opened her laptop, typing Elliot Reyes, Los Angeles, into the search bar. A few clicks later, an old local news article popped up. Single dad volunteers at East L.A. Library teaching kids life skills. The photo showed him smiling amid a group of children stacking books and demonstrating basic tools. The story detailed how after losing his wife to cancer 3 years prior, he'd turned his grief into community service, helping underprivileged kids learn everything from reading to simple repairs. Curiosity piqued. Julia mapped the library's address. The next day after a board meeting, she drove to East L.A., a neighborhood of faded murals, corner bodegas, and families scraping by. It was worlds away from her polished life. Parking a block away to avoid drawing attention, she approached the modest building, its sign weathered but welcoming East L.A. Community Library. Through the window, she spotted Elliot inside, kneeling to help a child reach a shelf. He moved with quiet efficiency, his face softening as he chatted with the kids. She didn't go in that day, just observed from afar, but the image stuck with her, the man who'd towed her car, now surrounded by laughter and learning. A week passed before Julia returned, this time stepping inside. The air smelled of old paper and faint coffee. An elderly black woman behind the desk, Teresa, as her name tag read, greeted her warmly. First time here, looking for something specific. Julia hesitated, then grabbed a random book from the display. Just browsing. She wandered the aisle, stealing glances at Elliot, who was organizing a workshop corner. He didn't notice her. Over the next few weeks, her visits became routine. At first she pretended to read, but soon she joined storytime sessions, her voice steady as she read picture books to wide-eyed children. Teresa chatted with her during lulls, sharing stories of the neighborhood's struggles and triumphs. Folks here work hard, but resources are slim. Elliot's a godsend. He fixes what breaks and teaches the kids to do the same. One afternoon, Julia overheard Elliot praising a drawing by a girl with curly hair. Lucia, that's incredible. You've got real talent there. The girl beamed her sketch on a crumpled pizza box liner. Thanks, Dad. Wish I had better paper. Julia's heart twisted. That night she contacted an art scholarship foundation, arranging an anonymous donation to the library for supplies and classes. The accidental encounters continued. Julia timed her visits to overlap with Elliot's volunteer shifts, borrowing books she never finished. One evening, as rain began to patter against the windows, she lingered longer than usual. The library was emptying out and Teresa locked the front door. "Storm's coming down hard. Stay a bit if you like." Elliot was stacking chairs nearby. He finally acknowledged her with a nod. "You're the Tesla owner. Wright didn't expect to see you here." Julia smiled faintly. "Books don't judge your parking skills, nyamba." They ended up sitting at a table as the rain intensified thunder rumbling outside. Conversation started awkwardly about the weather, then books. Julia quoted a line from Walt Whitman, "I am large, I contain multitudes." Elliot raised an eyebrow. "Didn't peg you for poetry? Hemingway's more my speed. Simple, direct." Not surprised. The old man and the sea about perseverance. He nodded, a ghost of a smile appearing. "Life's like that sometimes. You fight the current even when it pulls you under." For the first time, Julia opened up slightly. "I grew up with everything handed to me. Never had to fight much until recently." She didn't elaborate, but Elliot didn't pry. As the rain eased, they shared a quiet laugh over a mismatched book recommendation. Walking to her car, Julia felt a strange warmth. This man with his calloused hands and unyielding principles saw her as just another person, not a CEO, not a wallet. And in that simplicity, something in her began to shift. Julia's visits to the East LA Community Library became a ritual woven into her schedule like board meetings or investor calls. What started as curiosity evolved into something deeper, a pull she couldn't quite explain. She arrived with boxes of pizza on Fridays, claiming it was leftover from a work event, though Teresa raised a knowing eyebrow each time. The children swarmed her, their faces lighting up as she distributed slices and asked about their days. Lucia, with her wide eyes and endless sketches, gravitated toward Julia most. "Look what I drew today," the girl would exclaim, thrusting forward a page filled with vibrant colors on whatever scrap paper she could find. Julia praised each one earnestly, suggesting techniques she'd picked up from online tutorials late at night. Benji was even more direct in his affection. The 6-year-old would spot her from across the room and charge forward, wrapping his small arms around her legs. "Blondie ladies here," he'd yell, his grin infectious. Julia laughed, scooping him up for a quick hug before setting him down to join the others. Even Mateo, the reserved teenager, nodded in acknowledgement during her visits, though he kept his distance buried in his laptop or a coding book. Elliot noticed the change, too. At first, he kept interactions brief, polite nods, short comments about the weather or a new book donation. But as weeks passed, their conversations lengthened. One afternoon, while shelving returns together, he mentioned Maria offhandedly. "She loved this place. Used to bring the kids every Saturday." Julia paused, her hand on a spine. "She sounds wonderful. The kids talk about her sometimes." Elliot's expression softened. "They do. It's good they remember." For Julia, these moments were revelations, glimpses into a life grounded in quiet resilience, far from the polished negotiations of her world. Mateo, however, observed with a sharper eye. At 15, he was perceptive beyond his years, honed by years of helping his father navigate bills and schedules. One rainy afternoon, as Julia checked her phone during a lull in story time, he caught a glimpse of her screen, an app with a sleek, exclusive interface he'd seen in a tech article about high-net-worth banking tools. The logo was unmistakable, reserved for clients with portfolios in the millions. He said nothing then, but that evening after dinner, he pulled up his laptop in the living room while Elliot washed dishes. "Dad, have you noticed anything off about Julia?" Mateo asked casually, his fingers flying across the keys. Elliot dried his hands on a towel. "Off. She's been helpful. Why, just, she doesn't fit here. Like her phone, it's got apps I've only read about for rich people." Mateo hit enter on his search, Julia Meyer, Los Angeles. Results flooded the screen. The top hit a Forbes profile. Julia Meyer, the 31-year-old CEO disrupting e-commerce with e-com core net worth estimated at $85 million. Photos showed her at galas shaking hands with venture capitalists, her Tesla in the background. Elliot leaned over the screen, his face draining of color. He scrolled through articles, her startup's meteoric rise, the inheritance from her mother's estate, quotes about innovation and disruption. The anonymous donations to the library suddenly clicked the art supplies, the scholarship fund. "She's been playing us," he muttered more to himself than Matteo. The next afternoon at the library, the air felt heavier than usual. Julia arrived, with her usual enthusiasm, helping Lucia set up for a drawing session. The girl chattered excitedly about a new crayon set that had magically appeared last week. Julia smiled, but before she could respond, Elliot approached, his posture rigid. "Can we talk outside?" he said, his voice low but edged. Julia followed him to the small patio behind the building where rain puddles still lingered from the night before. "What's wrong?" Elliot crossed his arms. "I know who you are. Julia Meyer, the millionaire CEO, the one with the $85 million empire. Why are you here pretending to be just another volunteer?" Julia's stomach dropped. "I never pretended. I just didn't bring it up. It's not who I am here." He let out a bitter laugh. "Not who you are. You've been buying pizzas, funding scholarships, acting like you're one of us, but it's all a game to use some rich girl's charity project. We have a right to know who's pulling the strings." "It wasn't like that," Julia protested, her voice cracking. "I came because I was curious at first after the tow. But staying, it was because of the kids, Teresa, you. For the first time, no one cared about my money or title. I felt real." "Real?" Elliot's eyes flashed. "You waltzed into our world, controlling things from behind the scenes, anonymous donations. That's not help. That's manipulation. We don't need your pity." Julia stepped back, hurt, flickering across her face. "It's not pity. I wanted to give without expectations. Without it being about me." Elliot shook his head. "Expectations or not, it's dishonest. Please just go. We were fine before you showed up." He turned and walked back inside, leaving Julia standing alone in the damp air. She gathered her things quietly, avoiding the children's confused stares, and drove home in silence. The penthouse felt emptier than ever that night. Back at the Reyes home, dinner was tense. Lucia poked at her food. "Where's Julia today? She promised to help with my drawing." Elliot sighed. "She's not coming back, mija." "Why?" Lucia's eyes welled up. "I don't care if she's rich or whatever. She teaches me to shade, better listens to my stories. She's nice." Matteo, sitting across the table, chimed in quietly. "Dad, you always say kindness doesn't care about money or where you come from. Why does it matter now?" Elliot stared at his plate, the words hitting like a punch. He'd taught them that lessons born from Maria's illness, from scraping by without handouts. But now, faced with Julia's deception, his pride had clouded it. Benji, sensing the mood, climbed into his lap. "I miss Blondie, lady. She makes funny voices in books." That night, as the kids slept, Elliot sat on the porch, the city lights distant and mocking. Julia's face replayed in his mind, not the CEO from the articles, but the woman who'd laughed at Hemingway quotes, who'd knelt to tie a child's shoelace without fanfare. Was it all an act? Or had he judged her too harshly, the way he'd once been judged for his background? The questions kept him awake, stirring a conflict he hadn't anticipated. Julia sat in her penthouse that evening, the city lights blurring through the rain-streaked windows. The confrontation at the library replayed in her mind Elliot's words like a wall she'd slammed into. For the first time, someone had called her out, not for being too ambitious or too wealthy, but for hiding behind it all. She wasn't angry. She was reflective. Pacing the marble floor, she decided she wouldn't return to the library uninvited. Not out of spite, but respect. If her presence felt like an intrusion, she'd step back. But that didn't mean she'd disappear entirely. Over the next few days, Julia channeled her energy into transparent support. She contacted the library's board, such as it was a small group of community leaders, and offered a public donation under her full name, Julia Meyer, CEO of Ecom Corps. The funds would cover art supplies, new books, and even a modest renovation for the children's section. No anonymity this time. She insisted on a simple plaque acknowledging the gift, nothing ostentatious. Teresa called her the next day, her voice warm over the phone. "Honey, we appreciate it, but you know you're welcome back any time." Julia smiled faintly. "I know, but this way it's clear, no strings." She didn't stop there. Hearing from Teresa about upcoming community cleanup events, Julia showed up in jeans and a plain hoodie, gloves in hand. No cameras, no entourage. She spent a Saturday morning picking up litter along the neighborhood streets, chatting with residents as they worked. A few recognized her from the library, others just saw a woman pitching in. One elderly man handed her a bottle of water. "You're new around here, but thanks for helping." For Julia, it was liberating, contributing without the weight of her identity overshadowing everything. The scholarship for Lucia weighed on her most. She'd already set it up anonymously, but now she reached out to the Art Foundation directly requesting they inform the family of the donor's name. A letter went out, full disclosure, no expectations. Julia imagined Lucia's excitement over proper classes, and it eased the ache in her chest a little. A week passed in this quiet resolve. One stormy evening, as thunder rolled over the city, Julia sat at her desk with a pen and paper, old-fashioned, deliberate. She wrote to Elliot, her words careful but honest. "Dear Elliot, I'm sorry for not sharing who I am sooner. It wasn't meant to deceive. I just wanted a place where I could be Julia, not the CEO or the heiress. Coming to the library started as curiosity after our first run-in, but it became more. You, the kids. Teresa, you all showed me what real connection looks like without agendas. I realize now that keeping my background hidden felt like control to you, and for that, I'm truly sorry. I've stepped back because I respect your space. The donations are public now. No more secrets. I won't knock on that door again unless it's open from the other side. Thank you for reminding me that rules matter, and so do people. Julia." She sealed the envelope and dropped it in the mail the next morning, her hand lingering on the slot. It felt final, yet hopeful. Elliot found the letter in his mailbox 2 days later, the handwriting elegant but unpretentious. He waited until the kids were asleep to open it, sitting at the kitchen table under the dim light. As he read, his jaw tightened at first, then relaxed. The words echoed his own lessons to the children: kindness without strings, honesty in actions. He thought of Maria, her voice clear in his memory from their last days. Love isn't about being the same. It's about daring to meet in the middle. She'd said it during a rough patch when his pride had nearly driven a wedge between them. The letter crumpled slightly in his grip. Julia hadn't defended herself aggressively. She'd owned the mistake. And in admitting the library had saved her, she revealed a vulnerability he hadn't expected from someone like her. Lucia's words from dinner replayed, "She's nice, Dad." Mateo's challenge, "Why does it matter now?" Even Benji's innocent hugs to Blondie Lady tugged at him. Outside, rain began to fall again, heavy and unrelenting. Elliot stood, grabbed his jacket, and stepped into the downpour. He knew from Teresa that Julia had rented a small apartment nearby, perhaps to stay connected to the neighborhood without imposing. The walk took 20 minutes, his shoes splashing through puddles, but clarity sharpened with each step. Pride had blinded him. Julia's wealth didn't erase her intentions. If anything, her efforts to make amends showed character. He reached the modest building, water dripping from his hair as he climbed the stairs. Knocking on the door, he waited, heart pounding louder than the storm. Julia opened it, surprise etching her features. She was in casual clothes, a book in hand, her hair tied back simply. "Elliot." "What come in, you're soaked." He stepped inside, but stayed near the door, pulling the letter from his pocket, damp but intact. "I read it. Every word." She nodded, bracing herself, and I believe you. No one writes like that without meaning it, without a real heart." He paused, meeting her eyes. "I overreacted. Seeing your name online, it stirred up old resentments. But the kids miss you. Teresa does, and I do too." Julia's breath caught. "You do?" He nodded. "Let's start over. No secrets, no assumptions. Just us, in the present, if you're willing." A small smile broke through her uncertainty. "I'd like that. More than you know." From that rainy night forward, Julia and Elliot rebuilt their connection slowly, without pretense. She returned to the library not as a secret benefactor, but as herself, open about her life, her wealth, and her vulnerabilities. The children embraced her seamlessly. Lucia started calling her Aunt Julia at first, then simply Julia, sharing sketches and dreams of art school. Benji climbed into her lap during story time, his small hands tracing the pages as she read with animated voices. Even Mateo opened up, showing her his latest coding projects and asking for advice on tech scholarships. Elliot watched it all with quiet gratitude, his initial wariness giving way to trust. Their relationship deepened through everyday moments. Shared dinners at the Reyes home, where Julia learned to make Maria's old tamale recipe from faded notes. Walks in the neighborhood park discussing books and life, and late-night talks on the porch about loss and second chances. Elliot shared stories of Maria's strength during her illness, and Julia opened up about her father's emotional distance after her mother's death. "I built an empire to prove I didn't need anyone," she admitted one evening. "But here with you and the kids, I feel like I finally belong." Elliot didn't propose in a grand setting. One crisp autumn afternoon, he led her to the park bench near where he'd first towed her car, the faded "no parking" sign still standing as a silent witness. "If I hadn't hooked that Tesla," he said, kneeling with a simple ring in hand, "I might never have met the woman who showed me life could be full again." Julia laughed through tears. "And if you hadn't refused my bribe, I'd still think money fixed everything." She said yes, and they shared a kiss as joggers passed by, oblivious to the quiet miracle unfolding. Their wedding was intimate, held in the East L.A. Community Library on a sunny spring day. Teresa officiated, her voice steady and warm. Mateo filmed on his phone, capturing every moment. Lucia sang a soft Spanish lullaby she'd learned from her mother, her voice trembling with joy. Benji, tasked with the rings, momentarily forgot where he'd put them, prompting a frantic search that ended in laughter as he pulled them from his pocket. Julia wore a simple white dress, no diamonds or extravagance, just wildflowers in her hair picked by the children. In the vows, Elliot promised, "To meet you in the middle every day." Julia echoed, "To live openly without walls." As they exchanged rings, the small crowd of neighbors, library volunteers, and a few of Julia's colleagues cheered. Afterward, Julia established an education fund for the neighborhood run by locals, including Teresa and Elliot. He continued towing cars by day, but expanded his volunteer work teaching practical skills to kids at the library. Work with your hands to understand real value. Together, they blended their worlds, weekends in East L.A., occasional trips to Julia's penthouse for stargazing from the rooftop. In quiet moments, Julia reflected on the transformation. For the first time, she was truly living, not performing, not possessing, but present, loving, and loved. As the family grew closer, she knew sometimes a faded sign and a stubborn tow truck driver were all it took to rewrite a life.